All right, Georgia tops number 1 or 2 Tennessee, however you look at it. We know that on Tuesday, Georgia will be the number 1 team exclusively in the country. So I thought Georgia would win this game. We talked about this a lot over on Dog Post, and yeah, and they did. I'm not. I just talked to a former player just for a second ago, and he agreed that he thought that Georgia should win the game, but the way in which they did it, it was really about. Um, Open field tackling, just executing defensively. This was a master performance from this Georgia defense. And talking to Kelee, I talked about Kelee a lot this week, and he was going to get beat. You, that's going to happen. The interception was huge. It stole a possession, and just their play in general. I would not care if you're getting pass interferences or holdings or whatever, because at some point they're not going to call that. And if you're all over those guys blanketing them, that is hard to deal with as a person. The number one thing in sports is space and time. And when you don't have either of those things, it makes things very difficult. A friend of mine was texting me today, so why do you think Georgia's going to win? I had a response. It was 2 words: Jalen Carter. It wasn't just these. It wasn't just Kelee. It wasn't just Jalen. It was Georgia. It was too much. It was Brett Thorson. I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly. It was all of it. And you know, when you've only scored 6 points um, deep into the game, that's not Tennessee football. Georgia they didn't shut them out. They slowed them down in a very significant way. And I will add, the rain did not help those of us who were out there at all. We are not fans of the rain. We have very expensive gear, equipment. It's not fun. And it's even harder to do that if you don't run often, if you're not a run team. Tennessee had a hardish time running today. I think they had about 90 total yards. It was not ideal for the Vols, but you know, I, let me look at one thing here before I get too nuts saying, kind of getting out on a limb. Um, yeah, I don't know if Stetson outplayed Hendon Hooker. I don't know that. I know that he scored 2 touchdowns and Hendon Hooker threw zero. Hendon had an interception. Stetson should have had one. He did not. But the critical thing here is that Stetson was not sacked. Hendon Hooker was sacked 6 times, y'all. This was a very close replay to the national championship game against the Alabama Crimson Tide. And what Kirby Smart is as exceptional a defensive mind as we've seen in college football for a long time. Alabama, a season ago in the national championship game, scored 1 touchdown. Today, the number one offense in the country, they still will be the number one offense in the country tomorrow. They scored 1 touchdown. You can't function in this league if you can't run. Make sure you're checking out our event with Kelee Ringo. We had several, when he made that pick, we had several people sign up all at once. And, we're getting ready for that red zone. It's in, from the time you're seeing this, it'll be in 14 days. We are going to run out of space. I can see that now. So take advantage of it. And everybody who's going to be there is going to have a good time. Uh, listen. I think Tennessee's good. They're just not as good as Georgia. And they did play very well against Alabama. Those two will not play one another now unless Georgia loses to Kentucky and Mississippi State, and Tennessee runs the table. That's all unlikely. But this just came down to Georgia. I don't need the notes. I'll get back to them. But when you're watching the game and Tennessee's running for 4 yards, it looks like they're really running a long way from my perspective. And they're running for 4 yards. It's strange to see people run for like 7 yards against Georgia because it's hard to do that. And then today, Tennessee wound up with 94 yards rushing. 94 yards rushing on 42 carries. Now, there are some sacks included in that. That's only 2.2 yards a carry. Georgia had a hard time, too. I warned about this. Tennessee's not that bad on the defensively. 130 yards, 130 yards on the 37 carries, so that's 3.5. We didn't see Stetson get loosed. I think the one thing is the fumbles. Georgia, if they want to win the national championship, and they, after this weekend, are probably going to be the odds-on favorite to win it again over Ohio State. And I'm not killing Ohio State. They can beat Georgia. They totally can beat Georgia. You're going to play games where you don't play well. And that's what that was today up in Chicago. So I just, I thought Tennessee tried to play this game smart. They just weren't the better team. And, if this game were in Knoxville, Georgia probably would have won there too, I guess. I mean, that's hard to not pay attention to. How much does the crowd matter? It mattered a lot. I'm not going to make fun of Eric Ainge. He's just wrong. And, it's really hard to play on the road in college football. It's really hard to play in the SEC. Now, guess who plays their next two games on the road? The Georgia Bulldogs. Mississippi State is not as good as Georgia. Kentucky is not as good as Georgia. Those two teams are probably, 14, 16 points not as good as Georgia, something like that. But it's hard, man. When the other team gets momentum at home, you can just feel it in the air. It's hard to stop it. But I thought the competition level from Dumas Johnson, Smile Munden, certainly Bullard, Kelee, Lassiter, those guys hung in there, particularly the DBs, Malachi and Christopher Smith. The 4 DBs at Georgia, the wide receiver should win, y'all. The receivers should win. They just should. They know where the ball's going, okay? And so when you've got guys that are running with the other team, in their hip, yeah, the other guys are going to make plays. They got NFL wide receivers, Tennessee, and Georgia's got NFL DBs, but they're going to make plays, and that's not the point. The point is, how many terminal plays can you make? And today, weren't there 3 Tennessee turnovers? So they had the interception, and there were 2 fumbles or 1. So I got the wrong sheet here. It confuses me versus the other one. I don't know how many fumbles there were, but it felt like fumbles. Here we go. Fumble returns. So anyway, it was tough for Tennessee. They're a good team. They're not as good as Georgia, but they're a good team. Malachi today, and this makes sense that you'd play Tennessee and your top 5 tacklers are defensive backs. Malachi with 10, Bullard with 7, 2 of which were sacks, and those were straight up sacks. Those weren't like he was running towards the line of scrimmage. Kelee, 6. So Malachi, 6 solo tackles. Bullard, 7 solo tackles. Kelee, 6 solo tackles. Kamari Lassiter, 5. Christopher Smith, 3. That's a lot of solo tackles for a defensive back. Because you know what happens when you're a defensive back and you don't tackle and it's not a solo? They're not playing Rocky Top. They're playing the fight song. They play Rocky Top just to play it. They play the fight song when they score. You don't want to hear the score song. You don't want to hear the fight song. They can play Rocky Top all they want. Hot take, I don't care. It's a great Rocky Top's a great song. It's a great it encapsulates Tennessee in every way. But I thought, today Tennessee 3 points off of a fumble from the Dogs. They just couldn't. They never had those 1-minute drives. They just couldn't. I'm just trying to look at their time. Excuse me, they did have 1 or 2, but they were punts. They were these punts. Georgia just smothered them. It was a total smother job. Georgia had the one, that 8 in the third quarter when Georgia came out and took half the quarter to kick a field goal. 15 plays, 67 yards. The game was not over, but it was OBE. We're just waiting for the R, and that came soon there later. And I mean, what does this mean? That's, y'all watch this stuff, and I appreciate everybody that stops me. We get every walk of life that watches these videos, and I really mean it when I say we cannot do this stuff without y'all watching, without y'all supporting us. It does mean a lot, and we're very thankful for it. But what this means moving forward is, Georgia, if you win your next 3 games, you will be in the college football playoff. I don't know if you win the next 4 games, you're going to be not only in the college football playoff, you'll be the one, and hopefully you'll play, not a great, not as good a team. Whoever is not the one is playing Ohio State. I mean, because I think Ohio State is not going to be the one after this. Now, I say that. Let's just see what happens with Alabama. They are currently losing. I do not think Alabama will lose, but it's not out of the realm of possibility. Clemson, they are currently losing. I do not think Clemson will lose. Their situation is much more complicated than Clemson. Well, it's not complicated. I think that they can lose to Notre Dame, and if they do, obviously they're done. LSU's already got 2 losses. Alabama with a second loss, they'd be out. So, I mean, then you would be looking at a very serious showdown with either Ohio State, Georgia, or Michigan, and very possibly the Vols. And if you're playing a game against Tennessee in a second time, and you're not at Sanford Stadium, that's a different story. I mean, I think the penalties. Tennessee's not super disciplined. Well, if we're just being honest, I mean, that was a lot of penalties. And I tracked this stuff, but they had 9 penalties for 55 yards. It's just too many, and they were procedure penalties. I think the bulk of them. I mean, boy, we just don't call holding at all anymore. I mean, and I don't just mean the Tennessee side. I saw Georgia holding. I saw Tennessee literally tackle. I think it was Nazir or Warren Brinson, like literally tackled him. And there was another play where either with Broderick or somebody, they're just not going to call it. So just go ahead and hold, guys. I mean, it's got to be beyond obvious for that to happen. But the punting was exceptional for Georgia. I think one punch was not unbelievable. Yeah, I mean, Ladd McConkey was great. This is obviously a personal game for him. Stetson played really well. It is heart wrenching watching Nolan. But I think what, and I don't know what Nolan said, but I think when what I would have said is, y'all are the only guys that can go out there and play this game today, and you need to take advantage of that because you might not be able to play it in the future. You've got gifts other people don't have, and you have the opportunity now. Are you going to take advantage of the work that you've done, the physical tools that you've been given, the development that you've had over time? Are you going to take advantage of your opportunity? And today, Georgia did. Folks from the Peach Bowl were here. My suspicion is that it was around, I don't know, about 100 recruits, but probably certainly north of 60. And it was a party. And the Sanford, listen, I'm with Kirby. I don't know if that decibel reading I mean, I don't know if that's real. But I think he's stealing my line, too. I mean, I'm the one who's always said, once you can't hear, you can't hear. I see him just thieving my words. I thought the crowd today did what it should have done. I think it was awesome. I also think that that's the way it should be against Georgia Tech, at least during the beginning of the game. And it won't be. And I understand the Jackets are in real trouble and dire straits and all this stuff. But let's say that's not the case and you get to Atlanta. It needs to be like that in Atlanta too, because it's probably going to be Bryce Young you're dealing with. And you need to take full advantage. He is the best quarterback in college football. And I don't know, as a Heisman voter, yeah, I mean, this was not that bad for Hendon Hooker. I mean, if you want to still go with him, he was 23 of 33 with an interception. I mean, he had 17 yards rushing on 18 carries. Not ideal. But they were pressuring him constantly. So I just this would have been a terminal game for Georgia. I'm not sure this is terminal for Tennessee. I think they won't play Georgia in the semifinal, but uh, but unfortunately for the Vols, y'all listen, man. They were jacked for this game coming in. I mean, they were talking to the band. It was legit. I mean, like the Tennessee folks were ready for this game. The fans, they've waited a long time for this moment. Now they lost, right? I mean, and that, okay, but they won't lose again. They'll be 11-1. And tonight, if Clemson loses and Alabama loses, then you're in pretty good shape if you're Tennessee. I mean, this is not a horrible day. They've done a lot of work. I mean, they've beaten the best two teams in the West. They've lost by double digits on the road to the best team in the East. The Pitt thing is not great. One last lecture. If we're going to talk about Georgia struggling against Missouri, we cannot skip Ohio State struggling with Northwestern. Again, I thought it was a good win. I mean, you're not going to always play well, but that's going against Ohio State. Like when they beat Michigan or whatever happens there, I mean, you know, you know, they played bad against Northwestern, and Northwestern is not even close to as good as Missouri. So uh, both of them were on the road, but I, this is a Georgia team that is more than capable of winning the national championship. We talked about that in the summer. I won't say that probably in the summer of 23, I guess, but this is a program that is capable of winning it all. It's hard to beat them, and they are exceptional. They are driven. If you want to talk about the process, it's every day. They're not just going to lose. I mean, like, that's not just going to happen. You're going to have to beat them, and you're going to have to do it for 60 full minutes of them tackling you and throwing you on the ground and all this stuff. You're going to have to be physically tougher than them, which very few people are. You're going to have to be mentally tougher than them, okay? Maybe that's the case with teams. They're just not as the combination of the two is a real trouble for folks. But I thought it was one of the outstanding wins. Was it you know was this one of those things where people will remember this night in Athens forever? I don't know. I'll tell you. I was out last night at Paloma Park, which was awesome. If you're well, if you're chilling out in Athens this weekend or this week, I'm telling you, the food's good. Go chill at Paloma Park and watch 4 games at once. But um, it wasn't crazy in Athens last night. I can't hear the sirens yet, but it very well may be that it's nuts tonight. But we'll see. We got you covered a dog post. Do not miss out on the Kelee event now. The link is down below. Thank you for watching these. We'll see you. We'll see you from home.